Good morning, everyone. So today's session is on AWS DevSecOps best practices. So let's begin with today's session. So let's begin with what is DevOps. Um, DevOps usually means DevOps development along with operations. It is a combination of cultural philosophies, practices, and tools that combine software development with information technology operations, and these combined practices enable companies to deliver new application features and improved services to customers at a higher velocity. Now that was DevOps. So DevOps is not just limited to a team. It is to be adopted by the company. It is more like a culture rather than limited to a small team. So it needs efforts from developers, testers, and operation guys. So everybody needs to be involved when it comes to DevOps. Now, what is DevSecOps? DevSecOps takes this a step further. It is more like adding security. So you can say integrating security into DevOps. With DevSecOps, you can deliver secure and compliant application changes rapidly while running operations consistently with automation. So it is more like you already have a pipeline and you are just integrating the security into that pipeline. So having a complete DevSecOps pipeline is critical to building a successful software factory, which includes continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous testing, continuous logging and monitoring, and auditing and governance, and then the operations. It involves identifying the vulnerabilities during the initial stages of the software development process, and it can significantly help to reduce the overall cost of developing application changes. But doing it in an automated fashion can accelerate the delivery of these changes. So if you have already introduced security in your pipeline, in your DevOps, so you can make it secure in the initial phase rather than finding the vulnerability after the application patch is released or the new code is introduced in the production, and then you find the vulnerability and fixing it after that is not a recommended approach. So it is way better to have it known in the beginning and fix it during the testing or during the development phase. So our goal is to achieve that. And how can we do that? Let's see. So as DevOps suggests CI/CD, so we are going to have overview of all the services that we can use from AWS to have a complete CI/CD pipeline, which has integrated continuous testing, development, deployment, and everything. So the CI/CD services which are provided by AWS. Now, AWS Code Commit, it is more like GitHub or Bitbucket. So you can create repositories in there, store your code. Developers can use it just like they are using any other Git repository. And then you can use AWS Code Build. It is used for building your code. So let's say you have a Java application, and for Java, you need to create a jar, and you can use AWS Code Build, which can read the code from your code commit, and then build this code, create a jar, and then you can store this jar in S3. So AWS code build is more like your Jenkins, which is going to compile the code for you. And then you can use AWS code deploy. AWS code deploy is a service by AWS which you can use to deploy the code to either EC2 instances, to your ECS cluster, or or to your serverless infrastructure as well. And now here is this code pipeline. So code pipeline is, as the name suggests, it's a pipeline. So you can connect a series of deployments into one pipeline. So you can write a pipeline which can do all the things automatically. Like first it will pull the code from code commit, then build it, and then deploy it. It's more like connecting the dots. So that is the purpose of code pipeline. Now, there are other services that we can use like AWS Lambda, which is using the serverless infrastructure. So basically, AWS Lambda is used to run jobs that do not need infrastructure to be available all the time. So these are more like scheduled or on-demand jobs. So let's say you need to create a PDF, and you don't need a server to create a PDF which should be available all the time. Let's say you need to create a report at 9 a.m. every day, and uh, to do that, you don't need to have a server up and running all the time, because the job it's like 2 minutes job that runs every day at 9 a.m. So all you can do is you can create a Lambda that runs for 2 minutes, and your report is generated. And you don't need to worry about the infrastructure, because Lambda is serverless. So once the job is complete, you're not charged for anything else for other than just 2 minutes of your compute. And the next comes Amazon Simple Notification Service, that is SNS. So SNS plays important role when we are developing CI/CD. So it is more like notifying either users or the other services. So let's say you want to automate something. Let's take a scenario here. Mm, yeah, let's say you have a parameter in your param store, and you want to trigger a job. Let's say you want to trigger a lambda. So you want to trigger a lambda when that param is updated. So you can create a rule in AWS events for that param. The rule will watch the param and the update event or delete event for that param. So whenever you perform an action of updation on that param, it will create a SNS, and SNS will trigger the lambda. So in that way, you can use Amazon SNS. It can be used for other notifications, like whenever a code build or code deploy job fails or succeeds, you can create notifications, you can get emails. In that way, you can use SNS. And then comes S3, simple storage service. Um, so you can use S3 for storage purpose, like the jar. the code jar that you actually need to be run on the server. You can store that in AWS S3, and you can store your other config files in there. Your logs and everything can go in S3. And then you can put some lifecycle events in there, like for how long you need to store the files. If the files are these days or these months old, you can create lifecycle rule to have them either deleted or sent to Glacier. These sort of things. All these operations can be performed. And the next part is Amazon Systems Manage your parameter store. So as the name suggests, it's a parameter store. So while running applications in either EC2, ECS, EKS, Elastic Beanstalk, anywhere, you need some parameters. And the way that Amazon provides you to manage your parameters is through systems manager parameter store. So you can store your parameters in there, and your pipeline or your code deploy jobs, they can read the parameters from parameter store. So that is something that we can use. Moving on to the next slide, that is for continuous testing tools. So these are all third-party tools that you can use for testing OWASP dependency check, SonarQube, PHP Stan, OWASP SAP. So these are the tools that you can use to scan your code to find the vulnerabilities, or you can have a defined pattern for your code, or you can define the linting for the code. And these tools can run checks against your code and give you the findings. Depending upon the rules that you have created, these tools can let you know whether your code is up to the standard that you have already set or some predefined standards. So it's more like setting rules for coding. And if the code that you want to push or build is not up to that standard, it won't let you. So the build is never going to pass if any of these test tools fail your if you fail the test in these any of these tools, if you are going to use any of them. So it's always a good practice to have any of the code scanner integrated, because it will help you identify the vulnerabilities in the development phase. So even before the build is created, before a jar is created, it will let you know the vulnerabilities. Now, the next part is continuous logging and monitoring services. So logging and monitoring are two, two critical services that we need to have in any pipeline. So you can use AWS CloudWatch logs and CloudWatch events. CloudWatch logs can be used for logging, like excuse me. So CloudWatch logs can be used for visualization of logs from your server, from Lambda, from anything. So if you have an application that is running on EC2 instance and you have configured the AWS CloudWatch logs, so you don't need to log in to the server and check the logs. you can view the application log or system logs in the AWS console itself in CloudWatch. So the only thing is that you need to have it configured upfront. It's not configured automatically. So you need to go to your instance and have it set up to send the logs to AWS CloudWatch. So let's say your application is saving your logs in var log, let's say tomcat.log file. And then you need to have your CloudWatch agent configured to read that file and send the logs to CloudWatch so that you don't need to log in into the server to check the logs. And then is AWS CloudWatch events. So CloudWatch events is used for monitoring. Okay, so in events you can create rules that can monitor the event. So let's take another scenario here. So let's say you have a scenario where you want to assign a public IP. Okay, a public elastic IP to an instance which has a specific tag when it is launched. So either you can do it manually, but it's DevOps, and we don't recommend doing the work manually. So what you can do is you can create an event or create a rule in CloudWatch events. So this rule can monitor the EC2 launch events, launch instance events. So whenever a new instance is launched, this event is going to trigger a Lambda. That Lambda will have the code. So that code is going to monitor the instance. It is going to read the tags of that instance, and if the tags match the required value, then that Lambda is going to assign the elastic IP to that particular instance. So in this way, we can use these events, these rules in conjunction with Lambda, with SNS, or the serverless tools so that we can perform various automation tasks. Then comes the auditing and governance services. Now, when it comes to auditing and governance, we need some logs or some records that can show us what was happened at a particular time. So there are few services that are offered by AWS that we can use for this purpose. The first one is AWS CloudTrail. So by default, CloudTrail is not enabled. So CloudTrail allows you to log all the events, management events that are occurring in your particular region so that they can be audited. All you need to do is just go and enable CloudTrail in your region, and then CloudTrail is going to save your or create log streams in the S3, and you can download the log streams and see what happened, what API was triggered by what user or by what rule. It is kind of creating a logs for the AWS API calls, actions performed by IAM users or IAM roles. It is used for auditing purposes. And then is AWS Identity and Access Management. So IAM is another service offered by AWS that is basically used for handling users, IAM roles, IAM policies. It can also help in auditing and governance services because you can define the the permissions, the policies that a user or the actions that a user can perform. So it also helps in auditing and governance. And then comes the AWS config. AWS config is for managing the configurations of your application. So AWS config actually works with AWS alarms, and it actually watches the status of your application. So let's say you have your configuration. Let's say your application needs specific configuration files. So the config in that files is gonna be different for different environments, and you need to maintain different configurations. So let's say um, you have a file that contains set of configurations for production, another file for staging, and another file for dev. So you can use AWS config to deploy those configurations to different environments. So you can store your configurations in S3 and make AWS config to read those configurations from S3 and then deploy it to a set of EC2 instances. So what AWS config does is it is going to watch the status of the application. Let's say you have already created an alarm which monitors the state of the application, and let's say you deployed a configuration which was malformed, and because of that malformed configuration, the application goes down. And when the application goes down, the alarm gets triggered that you created. So AWS config is monitoring those alarms. So whenever the alarm is triggered, it is going to roll back the configuration. So it is more like you can say automating the configurations. So it's a new service by AWS which you can use to monitor the configurations of different environments. It's a nice service, but it needs to be integrated with AWS CloudWatch alarms. So you need to configure the alarms properly in order to use the service. And of course, it helps you keep track of the configuration changes. And then comes the operation services. So we are using different, or we can use different operation services by AWS. AWS Security Hub is not just one service actually. It has various services that fall under its umbrella. It's like the services like AWS Inspector. So all the services that deal with security, they fall under AWS Security Hub. So security information from various services, you can have them under one service, that is AWS Security Hub. Next comes the AWS CloudFormation service. Okay, so this is the service that you can use to set up the infrastructure or the deployments as well. So CloudFormation basically needs a template. A template can be a JSON or YAML document. So you can define all the resources and the configuration that you need, and AWS CloudFormation is going to use that template to create a set of resources with the defined configuration, and those resources are created under a stack, and you can manage those resources through that stack. So basically, CloudFormation creates stacks, manages them. You can update the stack, delete the stack. So everything when it comes to CloudFormation, it is being managed through stacks. Next comes AWS Systems Manager Parameter Store. We have already discussed this one. Parameter store is used for storing the parameters. Application can use parameter store to read the parameters from here. We can also use AWS Secrets Manager to store secrets, because secrets are like very important part of the application config. So you always need a, a secrets manager to store your secrets. You cannot define secrets in your code and leave them naked. So it's always a better approach to use a secrets manager. AWS does provide one, that is AWS Secrets Manager. So you can store your secrets in there. They can be encrypted as well. So application can read, or your pipeline can read those secrets on the go from Secrets Manager and have them ingested in the configuration. And the next component that AWS provides for operations is Elastic Beanstalk. Elastic Beanstalk is a really nice service offered by AWS to um, it. How can I define it? It is a service that you can use to create the infrastructure without worrying about the infrastructure, or you can deploy your application without worrying the infrastructure. So Elastic Beanstalk offers you that. You can just choose um, the language that your code is in. Let's say you want to deploy a Ruby application. You can go to Elastic Beanstalk, choose your environment, choose the instance type that you need. You can choose the security groups. Um, it automatically gives you the AMI that you can use. You can use your custom AMIs as well. So basically, Elastic Beanstalk provides you the environment that you can use to host your application. So all you need to worry about is your code. Rest everything is taken care by Elastic Beanstalk. It's a very nice way to deploy your application without worrying about the infrastructure. Small companies are relying on this service very, very much because um, they don't need to worry about the infrastructure, and that is what this service does. Okay, moving to the next section. I think that is, yeah, that is it. So we have covered CI/CD services because DevOps is all CI/CD. So we are our our aim is to minimize the manual work, and in order to do that, we need to have CI/CD solution in place. So in this session, we have covered CI/CD services that are offered by AWS that we can use, the continuous testing tools that we need to integrate in our pipelines or in our CI/CD solution so that the vulnerabilities can be detected at the very early stage so that they are not pushed to production. And then the logging and monitoring services. When it comes to monitoring, CloudWatch gives you the features, or you can create CloudWatch alarms to monitor different services. Let's talk about RDS. So you can have your alarms configured to monitor the CPU, the memory available, um, the the connections, current connections. And if you talk about EC2, you can have your alarms configured to monitor the status checks, CPU. You can monitor your load balancer. So these alarms can be used to monitor any service that is available in AWS. So these alarms mostly cover each and every policy and every metrics that are available in the CloudWatch console. And then depending upon the alarms, you can either trigger SNS or any other, if you have integrated any other third-party software for triggering the calls as well, like PagerDuty and any other, like you can integrate Twilio as well, so that whenever an alarm is triggered, you can get phone calls or SMS. That way you can use these CloudWatch alarms. And we did cover auditing and governance services, which are CloudTrail, IAM, AWS Config, operation services, Security Hub, CloudFormation, SSM, Elastic Beanstalk. So these are some of the commonly used services offered by AWS. These are not the only services, so the scope is not limited to these services. These are the widely used and which AWS recommends. These are those services. So you can always go and find out other services because AWS is offering new services every other day. So you can go use them, test them, have them integrated in your CI/CD solutions. Any questions? I'll take that.
Looks
Silent.
like,
Good.
yeah, silent as good and yes. That's the right way to take it. Thanks a lot, Bikram.
All
Thanks
right.
for this session.
Yeah,
Let's continue to keep in touch.
sure.
Guys, take care. Have a wonderful day. Take
All
care.
right.
Bye bye.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye.